Hi, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, I'm just thinking back as most of us often do, and I'm thinking back to days in the summer when I used to work with a friend of mine, Nick Carter, who was probably one of the most unique people that I've ever met. He's right up there with someone I admire a great deal of, and one of his reading material was a man I've mentioned once before, a writer called Carlos Castaneda. And Carlos Castaneda wrote a book which, if my memory serves me right, was called The Sound of Silence, but I'm not quite sure about that, so you might just want to remember Carlos Castaneda, because Carlos Castaneda went to South America, I think possibly to Mexico, and he studied with a Mexican Indian guru. And the Mexican Indian guru was Don Juan, and he studied with Don Juan. And even though I never actually got round to getting that book, Nick and I talked about it a great deal. And one of the things that struck me in it was the phrase, stalking yourself. And stalking yourself leads, for my money, it leads to increasing your self-esteem. Now, you can always tell someone who has low self-esteem. He will be a compulsive talker. I must have the wrong teeth in today. Anyway, if a man is a compulsive self-talker, where everything is about him, you must have heard that joke. Well, enough about me. What do you think about me? So self-esteem, the first step to looking at self-esteem and actually feeling better about yourself is the idea of stalking yourself. So stalking yourself, if you think for a moment about learning a skill, you're learning a skill, I don't know, playing golf, playing tennis, pool, any of those skills. How does it work out? Well, you do it. You do the action, and then you see how well you did, and then you repeat. You assess yourself. This is actually happening. You say, "Oh, I didn't do that so bad," or "Did that terrible." And then you try again, and you repeat the action, and then you assess that, and then you repeat the action, and you assess that, and you repeat the action, and you assess that. In effect, it's as if you are stalking yourself, because even though you may have someone teaching you, it's still down to you looking at what you're doing and honestly assessing your performance. Well, when you stalk yourself in a spiritual sense, you are looking at actions in which you perform. You're looking at behavior. So a person with low self-esteem is where the person hides bad behavior, his own bad behavior, from himself. Well, that's why you stalk yourself. So stalking yourself is you watch how you're doing, and then on the basis of your own assessment of whether what you did was good, bad, indifferent, if you are stalking yourself with the intention of improving yourself, expanding your beingness, awareness, strength in every way, then you will be completely honest. Now, this is where sometimes you might think that a Christian would be very good, because you can explain to a Christian that he is always being watched, and he will think of the God without. I think this is a fair generalization, but he perhaps will think of the God without, and the God without is always watching him. Well, Don Juan, the Mexican guru, would say stalk yourself is like being stalked by the God within, and the God within is the what some people have called their conscience. It is a slight essence of beingness which is separate from yourself, in that you do something and then you can see what you've done. Now, I should do a disclaimer here and say that this video will not be for everyone. But if you're going to stalk yourself and you're going to look at what you do, there is a cycle of action that is involved in increasing your self-esteem. And your self-esteem is monitored, and a level of self-esteem is awarded by yourself to yourself. Now, I'm not talking about schizophrenia here, okay, and hearing voices, but actually I am talking about hearing voices, because we all talk to ourselves, and our self-talk is very, very important. If you find a person who will verbalize what they talk to themselves on, and they're saying, I'm no good at that, I'm no good at this, then indeed they will not be any good at this, and they will not be any good at that. The fact is that when we talk to ourselves, we are monitoring our own behavior. Now, if you go along doing bad stuff, and this is where the whole idea of Christianity, of having, say, Jesus as your personal saviour. Well, the born-again Christians, they like to have that phrase installed where they say, I accept into my life, something like this, Jesus as my personal saviour. And then they mark what they do against what they perceive their saviour, Jesus, would actually do. In fact, at one time in California, there was a big movement where they even had what would Jesus do bracelets, I believe. And when in doubt about the right or wrong of something, you would say to yourself, what would Jesus do? And then you would monitor your behaviour and adjust it accordingly. So there is a cycle. There's where it's the basics of self-esteem and improving it. Now, why should you bother about self-esteem? Well, based on your self-esteem, you may or may not accept a challenge. You may, a new job, a new partner, a friendship. There are all kinds of things in which your self-esteem is very important, because if your self-esteem is such that that little voice inside you is saying you'll never be able to do that, then of course it's very important, because you need to meet challenges, you need to win, you need to grow stronger, you need to be a better person, and hopefully by the end of your life you will have awarded yourself a high self-esteem in which you trust yourself to make right decisions. And it is important. A cycle of behaviour and self-awareness, changing behaviour, all of these things are very important. That's why we hold to certain rules. I wrote down some rules here which you would hope perhaps to teach your child, at the same time as acknowledging that perhaps you are a work in progress yourself and should be keeping to these same rules. So a guidance for a child on behaviour. Well, you would hope to teach your child to keep your word. You would tell him, keep your word, keep your promises. Because if you ask him to do something, ask her to do something, and you say, now, will you promise me that you will do that? And she gives you a promise, and then doesn't keep that promise, then there is a little less confidence in their behaviour. So you keep your promises, you keep your appointments once made. If you agree that you're going to do something, then perhaps it would be the best idea for how others will perceive you that you keep your appointments. Once you have set an appointment, you be on time. And this goes over into keeping agreements. Now, whenever you meet someone and you're beginning to form a new friendship, that friendship will be as solid as your ability to keep to these basic rules. Like if you say to your friend, your new friend, okay, why don't we meet at 10 tomorrow, and you get there at 11:30, the next time that you say to your friend, why don't we meet at 10 tomorrow, he's going to say, is that 10 for 11:30 or is it 11:30? Why don't you just tell me 11:30, and then I won't have to sit there waiting for you for an hour and a half. You be truthful. If you were unable to get to your appointment, then you would, just as a matter of course, you would tell the truth. So you would keep your word. Now, how does anybody know that they are being watched by themselves as they stalk themselves? Well, it's an automatic thing. As soon as you agree to do something and you then fail to agree to that, you will make several kinds of different excuses to justify your action or inaction. And in doing that, yourself, that self that sits on your shoulder, the right shoulder of course, is watching you and listening to you. And as you win and lose on keeping to these basic rules, your self-esteem is adjusted. So when people talk about these kinds of rules, shall we say, you are listening in more than one level of awareness. You've got that voice. If you think that there are not more than one level of awareness, try this little exercise on yourself. Ask yourself, am I happy? So write it down on a piece of paper. Are you happy? And then answer that question. And then listen to that little voice that makes a comment, you know. Are you completely happy with your life? Absolutely I am. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, what about paying the gas bill? What about paying water? What are you going to do for a car when it breaks down? What about all those people, you know? That inner voice will certainly tell you what your actual reality is. And I've said this before about self-esteem, about how a friend of mine who would be most indignant if you asked him what he actually deserves. Because he would say, well, I deserve a good job, I deserve to be acknowledged for the skill that I have, I deserve a decent place to live, I deserve a nice new truck, I deserve these. And he would tell you what he deserves. Now, then, on this particular occasion, I said, do you want to know what you really think that you deserve? Oh, okay. Well, you deserve not to be acknowledged. You deserve to be ignored for your skill. You deserve to be unpaid or lower pay than you really should want. You deserve not to live in a place that is nice. You deserve to struggle for paying the bills, and you deserve to drive around in a heap of junk. He was most indignant. But I said, how do I know that that's what you deserve? And he said, yes, how do you know? I said, because that's what you have. We adjust our life and our lifestyle by our inner sense of worth, and we give ourselves what we truly think we deserve. Now, I'm not talking about whether you should have all of those things that he said, because obviously everybody should. But if your behavior has your inner monitor that thing, that essence of spirit, which is monitoring the way that you behave and finding you lacking, it will give you what, in your own sense of self-disappointment, your lowered expectations. You'll know that you shouldn't have a great job because you're always late for work. You'll know that you shouldn't be acknowledged for your skill because you don't keep up the standard that's expected of you, and you'll cut corners when you do things. In other words, your standard of what the quality of your work is lacking. And who knows best that it is lacking? You. You're the one that, whether you like it or not, you are the one that is stalking yourself. You earn your self-esteem and the level that it is by your own self-judgment. Now, you can go into an inverted, negative, judgmental case, but it will be based right at the very most basic foundational level by what you've observed you do. Now, whoever will find out that you're lying if you're clever? You will. Who will find out that you're a thief if you are? You. You will know. When someone says, "Are you being honest?" and you're not, who knows? If it's about something like, what time do you get up every morning, and you know that he will expect you to say 7 a.m., and you say 7 a.m., is he in your bedroom? Is she in your bedroom? Of course they're not. They have no way of policing you on the answer to that question. So who will? Well, you will. That's why you have to be aware of your own behavior and honest in your appraisal of it, because whether you like it or not, that inner voice, that Jiminy Cricket, if you remember the famous Disney, well, the old folk tale of Pinocchio, Pinocchio had to have an exterior God, an exterior conscience, and Jiminy Cricket was it. Jiminy Cricket was the one that looked on him and said, "You know, this is no good." And Pinocchio said, "Nobody will know." Well, Jiminy Cricket knew, and call it what you like, call it God, call it the Lord, call it the universe, call it your higher self, call it whatever is real to you according to your beliefs of how things work, but you are being watched, and as you behave, so you will be judged, and as you are judged, so your self-esteem will be self-adjusting. If you're going round behaving badly, your self-esteem will suffer, and then you will have to, sorry, the battery pack suddenly flashed up. Then, as you are judged, and as your self-esteem is raised or lowered according to the quality of your integrity or your beingness or spirituality or just goodness within, that's where your self-esteem will adjust itself to. And depending on where it is, you have a lot to learn. Well, most of us have a lot to learn. Present company accepted, of course. This is a foreigner in the Philippines on an almost flat battery pack. Thanks for looking in. Bye for now.